Hey everyone, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some coffee. My favorite spot, because of the people, because of the coffee beans, all the good stuff, is Cafe 211 in Bentonville. If you're not in the Northwest Arkansas area, though, Cafe 211 also offers their beans and their coffee mugs deliverable, I think, nationwide. So you can create that whole experience from your home. Mauricio Guerrero is the founder of Cafe 211. He is from Guatemala and his coffee is from Guatemala as well. There's a beautiful story that's tied to it. I encourage you to check out the Cafe 211 website, check out Mauricio's story, the story of the coffee and the people who make it, and go ahead and buy some and we can sip it together during our next conversation. And you can use the discount code Cara Elvira 10 to get a 10% discount on your order. Good afternoon, Shabana. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and interview me. This is
Oh my
exciting.
gosh, the privilege and the pleasure are completely mine. From the moment I first saw your work, I was like, I can't wait to talk to Shabana. I hope she'll talk to me. And so I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, which is like a beautiful day in Northwest Arkansas. And I hope you get to go outside later and enjoy it. I know I'm going to try to.
It's actually perfect timing because I just finished the reception for my solo gallery show in Fort Smith, as you saw online. So
Yes.
it's so nice just to slow down now and actually have this chat with you and just kind of reflect on things and catch up this way. So it's perfect timing.
I love how that worked out then. And I can't wait to talk about that exhibit and so many other things. For anyone who doesn't know you yet, this is Shabana Kauser. She is a visual artist extraordinaire and her journey spans the globe. And I'm really excited to see what all that means for her work and who you are, Shabana, and what you care about. So we tend to like to start at the beginning with your personal background, how you ended up maybe in Northwest Arkansas is a cool part of your story, and how you ended up finding this passion for art that you're really talented with.
It's such a story. It's such a story that you have to really sit down with somebody and tell them. So I'm glad to share it here. Well, I grew up just on the suburbs of London in England. I was one of five children. I'll go into my family background a bit later, but I was one of five children, and coming from a Pakistani immigrant background, I suppose the creative sector wasn't as encouraged as much. They were looking for more jobs where you were going to survive. So perhaps STEM subjects and the business subjects were pushed more, and to do that as a career. So that's where I kind of gravitated towards, and I never really saw any strong role models that that were an artist or were doing something creative. So that was kind of minimal. So I enjoyed art at school. That's under the age of 16. But then when it got serious time to work, I flipped to the kind of business subjects and just carried on in the corporate world. I moved to central London when I was in my 20s to do my degrees, my degree in business IT and my master's degree. And then I started working in London, and that was kind of it. And you're on this path of what you've seen other people go on, and you're kind of expected to do it. And you go along it, and then things just drastically change. So my husband and I, we vacationed in America a few times, the typical touristy states that you go to. We have not been to Arkansas, just to get that out there. He had a friend in America, and then a contact reached out to him and said, hey, why don't you come and work for my business? And he was working a corporate job in England as well. And he'd always wanted to live in America, but we didn't ever think it would happen. So we were like, okay. And we saw the criteria, what was required, the legal requirements through a visa, and it was so complex. And we just thought, this is never going to go through. We didn't know anything about the geography or the history of Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas, how there is a shortage of talent and certain skills, and how corporations are getting people to come over from other countries and states. And that's been a demand for quite a long time. We weren't aware of that. We just thought America. So we didn't think it would go through. I carried on working my corporate job, and he carried on with his. And I enjoyed life in central London. We were right by Tower Bridge, and everything was great. And then one day this email comes through the lawyer to say, hey, your visa's been approved. So at the time I didn't want to leave, so I said to my husband, why don't you go and see how you like it for 6 months, because you just never know when you're moving to a new place. It's one thing, I mean, we had visited Arkansas by now, we did a short visit, and you don't know what it's like when you move and actually live there for a few months. That's a whole different deal.
Right.
So I said to him, why don't you go there and experience it for so many months, and we'll kind of reevaluate it from there. So I hesitated a lot, and one of the deal breakers of me moving to America was, on my visa, he could work because the company had sponsored him to come here and contribute to America, but I could not work. So I had to stop working. I had to give up my job in England, and I don't have any kids. So all I knew was to work, and that's it. I mean, I had finished my education and I was excited about what I was doing. So I had to give that up in order to come here. And it was about a good 7 years before I could work or do anything. So it kind of took me out of the path that I was on to a completely new country with so many differences, and then being completely, I felt very isolated because I wasn't contributing or kind of doing something and being busy and still growing as a person, you know. So I felt very detached for like a number of years. But within those years, I decided not to give up. I tried to volunteer at various community kind of charities and events, and any social events that were going, I'd always kind of go out and about to them. And I did lots of work around our house, every project you could think of. And eventually I just sat there and I dug deep, and I thought, well, what is it that you enjoyed doing before you had financial responsibilities as an adult? Because now you've got the opportunity to do it.
Right.
And you're in a new country, so you could learn something new, you could do something new, even if you can't work. So I thought really, really hard, and I thought, well, art. I enjoyed art at school. I enjoyed drawing, I enjoyed painting. So I began to look at workshops online. I thought, well, let's see what's local. And there was a oil painting workshop going at the Community Creative Centre, which is just at the bottom of, well, on Dixon Street, just off of Dixon Street. They do lots of cool community classes. It was a lady called Trina Ward. She's a fabulous art mentor, she still is. She was running the workshop. So at that point, I mean, I had no expectations. I was close to giving up on a lot of things. I had no expectations. I thought, just go, learn something new, just enjoy it, and you'll connect with people that are also, you know, in this workshop. So that's what I did. And I just wanted to learn. And the more I wanted to learn, the more Trina shared with me. She just gave and gave, and I just absorbed all that information, and I didn't put any pressure on myself. Sometimes there was months before I'd go to a workshop. I just didn't take it as seriously as perhaps I should have done. And I finished my first painting, and people liked it. And then I got a commission offer to do. And I was like, really? I thought people were just being polite, you know, they were just being kind because they know I went through such a tough time. And I thought maybe they're just encouraging me here and, you know, trying to be supportive. I didn't take it seriously until the commission came in, and somebody was like, well, I'd really like a portrait of this. And by then I'd almost got my green card, and I did the commission. And then I started to just paint lots of famous faces, because I figured if people don't know who they are, then perhaps I need to do something else. You know, if they can't figure out who the famous face is, maybe I need to kind of reevaluate the situation. So I put a whole collection together of I just had fun with it. I just did lots of different faces. And when my green card came out, my husband said to me, well, you know, you can go and work now. It's like, I don't want to do that. I do not want to go back into the corporate world and do that. So that's when I launched my art full-time, more or less full-time. And I had my very first art show in downtown Rogers. And I didn't think anybody would turn up. I didn't think anybody would buy anything, which after speaking to like so many of my artist friends, they're like, we have the exact same feeling. So I think it's a common kind of thought or feeling that goes through you. And at the same time, I thought, do you know what? If nobody turns up and nothing happens, it's still my experience. I pushed myself to put enough pieces together to get them into a gallery space. I learned how to hang the work. I learned how to like put a description of myself and do all the marketing. I learned so much from it. I thought, well, that's a bonus in itself. So come the reception night, we just had people pouring out the door. It was really, really good. The support that I got was just amazing. It really was amazing. We had tons of people turn up. It was a busy, busy night. I exhibited with another regional artist, Angela Tita, who's based in Rogers. So we had a shared space. Marsha Foster, who's a professional photographer, she had a gallery downtown Rogers at the time, and she opened that up as a space to us. It was a fabulous combination of all three of us. We were also very different, but it just worked. And we still talk about it today and talk about what a fabulous night that was. So that gave me a huge like boost of confidence and encouragement. That just spoke volumes, and I thought, well, I could do this. So that was the start of my art, I suppose, putting it.
Oh my gosh, what a cool start. And I think it must have been such a great affirmation after all that hard work to see the people flooding in. But I think too, I mean, there's just so much great wisdom in your story. And the way you changed the goal was not like to sell the pieces, but like all the learning, like putting that at the forefront really helps maybe take off the pressure of like, I have to be world renowned, you know, money making like right this minute. It's like, no, like let's recognize all of the good that's come from every single thing that I had to experience, like to even get to the point of being in the gallery. I think that's really, you know, valuable to cherish those steps along the way. And also just knowing your story makes me so much more self-aware as a resident of Northwest Arkansas of the many people who might be here who are in a similar position of like, of this waiting time because they are a partner of someone who's here for work, right? Or they've just come, like so many different circumstances I can't even begin to understand, but like just the fact that you're here and doing it and that you found like joy in this time that was like probably really frustrating if you just because you were working and so active in the community. I love the way that you turned it into a productive period. I thought too, what was interesting what you said was about the classes that you started taking. And I think you said they were oil painting classes specifically, and that's the medium that you use currently, right? You paint oil painting?
It is. I did drawing in that class. I did oil painting. Oils is what my what a lot of the portraits that you've seen, they're oils. I tend to use acrylic as an underlay because it dries really quickly. So you can get your basic shapes and colors on there within, you know, within hours really. And then the oils take a long time to dry, so they're really good for details. So they are oil paintings just with the underlay. And then, as you know, I started some new work, so that's also exciting.
Yeah, so exciting. All these different like materials and their different advantages. So the oil painting, it's good for capturing the smaller details, or why do you use
that? Yeah, because it takes longer to dry. So when I'm doing the details, they take longer to kind of do because they're so fine and in tune. And when I'm doing the skin tones, I want to blend them. So with acrylic paint, I find that will dry too quickly, but with the oils, I can kind of smooth that over with a brush and blend them in more and capture that realness. For me, that's what works.
That's so cool. I love that the next time I look at your work or anyone's work, I can think about like the method behind that and how it does, like it takes time and consideration for what material is going to achieve that that outcome. I'd love to understand more too about the motivations behind your work. You touched a little bit on your family and their journey and these details, and the details come out a lot in the materials that you capture, I think. So maybe, and I can pull up your works. Maybe we'll talk about them through the lens of some specific pieces. So my screen should be up now. And this one, maybe you could explain this piece first.
Yeah, well, my work is based on my cultural background, and I'll go right back to my parents. When they were in their 20s, in the 1970s, they moved from Azad Kashmir, which is the Pakistan-occupied part of Kashmir, Pakistan. They moved to England. And England and Pakistan, or the old India, as you want to call it, because India was made up of Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. It was all one country, and it was occupied by the British. So there's a long-standing history between the two countries, and we could probably have a separate podcast kind of chat just for that in itself. But just to summarize, after World War II, because there was labor shortages in England and because of the strong connection of the two countries, South Asian immigrants were invited to come and work and live in the UK. There was labor shortages in the steel industry, in the textile industry, doctors, nurses were needed. So my parents decided to take advantage of that opportunity to better their lives. And they went through the immigration process. And as they went to the Pakistani immigration office, my sister was 1 year old, and that's my older sister. That painting is actually called Bahin, which means sister. And Bahin is an Urdu word, and Urdu is spoken in Pakistan. It's the formal language. And Urdu and Hindi sound very similar, but they're written very differently. So my sister, her name is Samina, she's older, and I think she was 1 year old then. And as they were going through the immigration program, the office rejected my sister. They wouldn't believe my parents that was their child. And they fought and fought hard, but nothing was going through. So my mum and dad obviously had a big family in Pakistan and still do. And they said, well, why doesn't my sister stay with my grandmother, and we'll sort out the legalities of it. And there was loads of other complicated information that went in there. And my mum and dad decided to make the break for England with the hope of fighting the case for my sister to get her to join them in England. And my mum was on the phone back and forth, and they paid loads of lawyers' fees. And I mean, it's just so complex. I think of the complex immigration I went through coming from England to America. It wasn't easy. So thinking back on theirs, yes, I believe that story, because I don't think much has changed. They fought and fought, and they went back to Pakistan several times and hesitated and thought about moving back, and years went on, and mum had 4 more kids. I was one of them, so I'm one of 5. And my sister eventually joined us when she was age 10. I know, it's horrifying, isn't it?
Gosh,
Yeah.
It's amazing. And immigration it's so complex, and for people who don't experience it, like, it's just such a blind eye to it, but like such strength for your family, and like for your sister to like be again like this like patience. It feels like a recurring pattern you guys have to be really good at.
Yeah, I mean, I said to her, well, we've talked about it as adults, and I said to my sister, well, how did you feel? You grew up as a child in a different household. She goes, well, I didn't know any different. Nan spoilt me like crazy, and I was the only child in the house, and I don't know any different. It was happy. And she said, well, what about you? I said, well, I don't know any different, because I had siblings around me and it was happy. So that was her experience. But when she arrived to England, she'd spoken mostly Punjabi and Urdu, which is very similar, and she didn't speak a word of English. So me and my siblings had been raised with both cultures. We spoke Punjabi at home to my parents, and Urdu, and we'd speak English in the traditional English school that every other child attended in England. So we got to learn both languages that way, and that's how we knew the difference, that there were 2 languages from a young age. So we had a fusion of both cultures in terms of food, clothes, language, friends, so much more, but she didn't. And as a child, it was a little bit strange, she was very different to us, and the language barrier, but I mean, that didn't stop us from obviously bonding. And I remember teaching her how to speak English growing up. We always have that memory as sisters. She taught me how to fine tune my written Urdu and my reading, and then she taught me Punjabi words as well. So she fine tuned my South Asian cultural side, and I fine tuned her English. So she still tells that story to her children today, who are now in their 20s.
That's amazing. I can't imagine, like, my sister is my best friend, and just to think of like getting to know her when we were both, like not older, like you were still kids when your sister was 10 years old, but just like what a special different way for a relationship to evolve, and also kind of like intimate to be teaching your sibling like the language that they're going to use like to get by in everyday life in this new country that they're living in. Must be a really just a cool memory that you guys share, and a great way that you have bonded. And I love this photo just for so many reasons. I'm not this photo, this painting of yours for so many reasons. It's so realistic. But also because it tells like such a story. Like there's so many layers to why different things were chosen about it, and this whole immigrant journey, and the way that you intentionally thought about your family's experience and your sister's experience versus yours coming to the US. It just makes you really stop and reflect. And for me, like I'm just getting a history lesson and a cultural lesson, everything in one. And in Arkansas, of all places, like to have this global lens, I think makes a big difference for all of us. So I'm really appreciative that you share this.
See, this is why I liked your social work background, your academic background in social work. This is why I thought, wow, this is going to be a really good conversation, because it's more than what's a painting, you know, and that's the conversations we're having. And that's what I really enjoyed about art. That's what it opens up. And I didn't think that at all.
Oh, thank you so much for seeing that in this opportunity. I am certainly interested in knowing the artist and knowing Shabana and what's going on in her brain that creates the thing that's on the paper, because I think that's what makes you so unique, and what makes you, such a unique contribution to this community that we're part of. In social work, we talk about persons in the environment. So each person who lives in a space, just the way that they're navigating it is changing the space inherently, and the space that they're in is changing them. And I think when you get to this crux of people who come from different places, it's like you just add another layer of like really interesting dynamics that are at play. So I love it. I'm super excited to keep learning. And so I'd love to, if you would, speak a little bit about maybe Silent Worker next.
Silent Worker is really explaining my mum's journey. So when she arrived to England, remember her English speaking skills were very minimal. She can speak it, but they weren't as good as perhaps somebody living and that was born in England, that was able to just easily go and get a job where language isn't a barrier. So what my mum decided to do while she was a stay-at-home mum raising 4 and then 5 kids, was she decided to use the skills that her mother had taught her, and her mother had taught her how to sew traditional clothes for the South Asian community. And on one side you see what's called a traditional shalwar kameez, which is a long tunic top and pants, if you want to put it that way, and the dupatta, which is a scarf draped across the side. And you could see that on the late Princess Diana. And she would sew traditional outfits like that for the South Asian women in the community, in the town that we grew up. So we would go to school and we'd come home and she'd have these just rolls of fabric that were just bought, and she'd cut them up, she'd tailor make them to that specific person, and the outfits would be worn to, from special occasions to weddings, to birthdays, to just everyday wear, which is what the women preferred to wear. So I grew up around the fabrics, and then I saw her just make something out of what she could do. And instead of thinking what I can't do, which is what I did when I first moved here, when I was frustrated, and then I flipped it and I thought, well, what can you do? And my mum was doing that all along, she just thought, well, what can I do? Well, I can use my skills here, and I can do this, and I can do it while the kids are at school. And I just thought that was such a strong message that I kind of forgot within my journey to America. And I speak English, I'm fluent in English. I was born and raised in England. I had my education there. I struggled with the move, but yet my mum kind of got on with it, I suppose, more so than I did. So that was, that's why I call that one Silent Worker, and the British flag and the scarf and the scissors and stuff. I had fun with that one.
I imagine, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but when you see these fabrics, like they must evoke some sort of emotion for you, right? Or some sense of home, and like, I don't know, in some ways, maybe comfort if it reminds you of your mom. Like, is that like accurate?
Yeah, it reminds me of the hard work, but also just the color. Here's some of the ribbons that we picked. We picked these one up in London before the pandemic hit, and the last time I visited, my big sister usually gets with me, and we go to the market stalls on the suburbs of London in a town called Southall, and they have lots of South Asian vendors there, family-run businesses with market stalls, and you know, we get to pick these up, touch them, buy them, and I'll bring them back. And just doing that alone, honestly, it's just, anybody would have fun with that. Anybody that's a creative that doesn't know the culture would just have fun with that.
Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh, I want to go with you. I want to join you guys and do this shopping adventure. I'm curious about, like, so you've done a few different, exhibits. Like, these works have been in front of people from all different walks of life. I wondered if you ever have a chance to, like, listen in on the conversations and see what this evokes in other people, whether they're have immigrated themselves or have ties to similar cultures. Like, could you speak to
the common thing that I get was, oh, I thought she was Indian, when they look at the portraits. And that's when I say, well, you're close, because India and Pakistan were one country. A lot of the fabrics, the language, the food, there's still lots of similarities there because it was one country once. And then you get into that separate conversation, and it's good because you're having that educational conversation, and they like that. And there's been like tons of conversations on that way. And then people have said, with the head jewelry, the gold jewelry, is that religious? And I'll say, well, no, that's more of a fashion thing. And that's okay for people to ask. And I don't want them to be uncomfortable. And they've asked that, and I just reassure them, like, it's fine, because I don't know anything. I don't know everything about every other culture. And I'd like to think I could openly ask that to an artist that's perhaps doing something with their culture. I'm hoping I could openly ask that question, and it would be welcomed in that way. So I always welcome them. And the funny thing is, you say that, but I'll go on to it a bit later, because I did some artist talks with some schools. I did one with the Girl Scouts in a local school, and that is a whole story in itself. So I'll kind of jump back to that one in a second.
Yes. That was exactly where I was headed. And we talked about, this path of education through art. I think that art almost like creates a space for that kind of like playing with like questioning and understanding and getting to know each other, because it creates something like to react to. I would love to know this deeper story about the ways that you work with local schools and share that education with like the next generation.
The schools have been, the Girl Scouts were amazing. They just wanted to know about everything cultural, from the fabrics to the paintings. And one thing I will say about children, it's great when you do artist talks, because it pushes me. I've done several adult talks, and it's a different level of conversation. So I'm constantly learning. That's what I love about my art journey. You're learning so many things outside of your creative practice. And an artist talk is one of them, because you've got to change the volume, the length of the talk, and that pushed me. And another thing which I love about presenting to kids is, kids have zero filter as adults. We're kind of, you kind of learn that, but they have no filter. So you get the absolute truth about what they think about your art. And they just get to the point, right? So I quite like that, and I did show Ben to the groups, and I just got a big gasp, and oh my God, wow, she did that. And after the artist talk, they even went and did some self-portraits of their own, because I talked to them about self-portraits and skin tones and painting and texture, and that inspired them to do that. The Girl Scouts came out with so many wonderful questions. The other artist talk was with the local middle school, and that was super cool. The teacher, the way she taught that class was amazing. And this was all virtual, so through the pandemic. So I got the feedback eventually back, but I wish I could have been in the class in person. But what she did was she showed them the oil painting Ben on the screen, and she didn't tell them anything about me. She was like, what do you think when you look at this painting? So you get the honest reaction out of the kids. And I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. But at the same time, I want to know, because it's probably what adults are thinking when they're going into galleries, right? But they're not saying it. And the kids were just amazing. They said she looks Middle Eastern, She looks foreign, she looks elegant, she looks like a princess, she looks like a queen, she looks like royalty. She could be Indian. They just had lots of great responses. She could be wearing religious clothing, which is fine because they don't know any different. They just had so much good feedback, and their answers were really, really good. So that was a huge learning curve for me, and I enjoyed doing that with them. I enjoyed showing them the fabrics. You've got a waist jacket and a coat there. I'll tell you the story about this.
Yes.
This, it's a kid's jacket. You can see the shiny mirrors and the fabrics on it, and a hat. And they're typically worn by children on special occasions, and they kind of originate from where the Afghanistan and the Pakistan border is. So you can see they've got more of a Middle Eastern influence rather than the Indian influence. And I was thinking about these, and I was talking to my big sister, and I was like, do you remember we saw kids wearing those? And she knew exactly what I was talking about. She went down to the local Asian store, picked one up, and got it shipped to me just like that. So I was like, and I didn't even have to find the word to describe this fully. She just knew it and she got it. So she's such a big part of my art, and we're able to do stuff like that. And it's great that she could just send me a picture and get it shipped within a number of weeks. So I've got that in my studio, and it's such great inspiration.
That's amazing. That like sister telepathy or just shared, memories is so powerful and so helpful. My sister actually edits all of these videos, and it's become such a fun way for us to work together when we have like nothing in common with what we studied in school or anything like that. But she happens to have this skill that I need, and I have these projects that she can work on. So I totally understand what it's like to get to partner with your sister. And your sister's in the UK right now, is she?
She is, yeah.
So I feel like just another layer then is it's so nice to have another reason to communicate when it's been probably harder to travel than it was, like you said,
Oh,
pandemic.
absolutely. I mean, the last time I saw her was the year 2019. She'd never traveled to the US. She was nervous. They had their misconceptions, a bit like I did when I moved to Arkansas. We all do when we're not familiar with the space. And I said to her, look, there's people from every single country coming into America, come. And she eventually did, and she loved it. After day one, she was like, yep, I understand why you're living here. This is so nice.
Oh my
And
God.
we took them to Crystal Bridges, and I had my work at 21C Museum at the time. I had Ben in there. So we took her to that, and she just loved it. They just loved just being here. It was great.
I love
That
that.
was
I
the
have
last
been
time I
getting
saw
my
her.
New York family to Arkansas. So I love that you got your UK family to Arkansas. I have to.
Oh, yours haven't been?
No, they have been, but like
Oh.
my friends and stuff, it's a little bit harder. But my parents come because of me, and then they come and they love everything else. But with the peer groups who are looking for like a fun weekend getaway, I'm like Northwest Arkansas, and I just have to post more of the local things. I think eventually it will sink in some personal marketing for our region. But I'm so glad that you brought up the 21C and different ways that you've been involved in your work has been showcased in this community. So we started with your first gallery show in downtown Rogers. We talked a little bit about your current show in Fort Smith, but between those two, I think a bit has happened probably. And what's always, I admire so much about artists is the way that they put themselves out there and how opportunities come. Like this is not a path that's charted for you when you decide that your profession is as an artist. So I'd love to know how you've like navigated the arts world in Arkansas and just like your profession.
I think art is such a people's, I don't know the word that I'm looking for, but it's very people orientated. I think most people think of artists as kind of hidden away, tucked away, and then eventually somebody discovers them and all of a sudden they're great. And in reality, it doesn't work like that. It's a very people orientated business. And I've had to learn the art industry alongside loads of other artists, and I've actually enjoyed it. That's been the fun side of it. I'm able to use a lot of my business background that I had, and just my willingness and in just the fact that I enjoy learning. I'm able to put that into it, and it's constantly, there's always something new that I'm learning in the art world, and I need to know that in order to grow. I learn from events. I learn from going to other people's exhibits, going to museums, all sorts. I mean, I learned the first time I ever put my cultural series out into a gallery. I mean, that was nerve-wracking. I painted, you know, it was so nervous to do from your famous faces, which is kind of a safe bet, to talking about me now, my work. And we're in Arkansas, and I was nervous about moving to Arkansas, but I had my misconceptions, and I think differently now, especially as the art world has kind of really showed me the difference, and they're embracing my work. When I decided to do my cultural series, the first thing I did was, it was a portrait of myself, but I only did my eyes, head jewelry, and the scarf.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the paintings, and there was another one. And I got them ready for the first show. There was a gallery in Fayetteville, and I put them in there, and I was nervous. And they wanted me to do an artist talk. And again, I was nervous. And the reception my work got was just a lot. People were just so interested, very welcoming of it. It was different, which they loved. They gravitated towards that. That gave me so much more hope and encouragement, thinking I can do this. And the more I met with gallery owners and curators, I mean, 21C, they loved the women in the traditional scarves. That's what they gravitated towards, because I've painted other things like your British rose, which is the floral emblem. I've done lots of stuff with roses and still life jewelry, but they just loved the women and the stories behind them.
Wow.
So just to get that energy off of a curator or gallery owner is really something, because that pushes me on as well, and it makes me learn from them. It makes you realize what they're looking for and what they're trying to do as a museum or a gallery, and how I fit into that, because that's really important to know as well. So it's always a learning, it's a big long learning journey, and I love it. There's always lots to do.
And I think, I don't know, I tend to be a bit of an optimist. And I think that often I maybe have this preconceived notion that people are going to hate it, like people are going to think I'm crazy, whatever. But at the end of the day, usually when you put yourself vulnerably in front of people, like they appreciate that and they respond to you in kindness, hopefully, often. I find that to be true. And it sounds like in your story, you found that as well. It's like you have this real talent. When you put it in front of people, they respond in ways that reflect that you have this real awesome talent. I think what's really resonates with me too is the ways that you apply your business background. So I got my undergrad in business as well, and it's been fun for me to see how does that fit into like the social work world, and how could I add value uniquely because I have this background maybe that's different than someone who went throughout their whole career or their whole education in the same field. I wondered if you could speak a bit to what that business acumen has meant for you in navigating like the art space.
I think it's been fabulous. I think it's given me the skills that perhaps some people don't have. It gives me the skill to sometimes, talk like this, do a public talk, which not everybody is comfortable with doing. I wasn't comfortable at first, but I knew I had to do it, and it would open up more opportunities. People would learn more about my art, which is crucial when you're trying to get your work into exhibits. They're transferable skills, I'd say, that's come from the business world. They're transferable skills, and I think it's opened up more opportunities. And the things that I'm, perhaps a little bit weak at, my business background helps me, and it keeps moving me forward, because I'm never going to be perfect and know everything. I couldn't tell you about art history. I didn't study art history. Yes, I read and I watch various shows and learn about it as I go along, but I could never compare myself to somebody perhaps that's got a PhD in art history. It's just not there. But what I can do, and again, it's going back to my mum and dad's philosophy, is I can use what I have got and think about what I can do with that. And that's what I'm grateful for it. So I'm appreciative of my background.
Yes, what an awesome legacy to run with, of like remembering what you have and not what you don't, and making it work. I noticed in your like background, and maybe it was on your website, that you had worked with the Arkansas Arts Council. They have a fund for artists that you're part of, or that you maybe benefited from. I know some of the people at the Arts Council through this YouTube channel, and I think the work they do is amazing. I wonder, okay, if someone's embarking on their arts career and they're like, well, there's, New York City, there's San Francisco, like there's London, why should I choose like Northwest Arkansas? Like, do you think that there's parts of the ecosystem here that make it especially really like a great place to grow in your craft and be supported?
I think it was a great place for me to start out. You know, they've been very welcoming, and the art community here has grown since Crystal Bridges kind of opened up. So Crystal Bridges was opened when I launched my art. So it's been kind of growing since then. So that's helped me a lot, and people are approachable. Curators have been very approachable. Other artists have been very approachable. I mean, I didn't know where to start when I was kind of putting my collection together. So I reached out to 3 all-female artists that I happened to know, and I bought them a coffee and I said, hey, tell me about your experience. You've done art shows. I haven't, because I can't do anything yet, but tell me about your experience. And I just listened. They talked and I listened, and I thought, well, how can I apply that to myself? What can I do with that information? So in that sense, I've had a fair number of artists that have given me really strong, solid advice, and they see me trying and they've reached back and they've given that support to me. So I tend to give that back when people reach out to me, because that's really important to do, isn't it? So that's been helpful. I don't know, I can't compare it to central London of having an art career there, because obviously that's not where I launched it, but I imagine it to be more just more stuff going on, and perhaps higher, more competition, perhaps because it's got a higher population. And maybe Northwest Arkansas, in that sense, it was great to start up. Having a studio, I mean, my studio's in my backyard. We built this. I don't think I could do that in England. We just wouldn't have the space. You know that coming from New York. I mean, living spaces in New York and London are way different to Arkansas. So I'm able to have like a room to store my art. I can have a room to produce my art. I have a space where I can do some of my resin work where it smells a little bit of chemicals. And I couldn't do that in England. I would have to go and rent out a physical studio, so that cost is higher. Also being in Northwest Arkansas, I suppose we can, which I have, is there's cities nearby that you can drive to. There's states nearby that you can drive to for art opportunities, which I've done. So in that way, it's been really attractive, and the art community has just welcomed my culture in. They've liked what I've done with my culture, and they've opened up, you know, exhibit opportunities. So I think it's been positive.
These are incredible insights. So thank you for sharing them for anyone who's not in Arkansas who listens and is curious. Maybe we could speak a bit too about, like, so currently your work is on exhibit at the gallery on Garrison, which is one of those like slightly further away experiences. It's still in Arkansas, but like maybe, I think it's like 90 minutes from Bentonville, maybe a bit closer to where you are in Fayetteville, definitely a bit closer. But how did that come to be? And is there like a focal theme to that exhibit?
The exhibit is all my oil paintings, which is the portraits, and there's still lifes, and there's a collection of my new work, which is mixed media. And if you don't know my new work, you can check it out on my Instagram, which is Shabana Kauser and I. But I'll show you a finished piece. I actually took a lot of the fabrics that I bought, and I use paint, the fabrics and resin to create these, I suppose they're abstract work. And it's my shine series, because they literally do shine. That's the bling right there.
Oh my gosh. Wait, so you said resin, right? Like it's coated in something? Like what is it? Like,
yeah, resin is like it's a liquid that you pour on there, and it just kind of freezes it over. So it's coated like a clear, it's like a thick nail polish, that's what it is. And there's a technique of getting that. So when the pandemic hit last year, this was on my, you know, I was thinking about doing this. That's a red on red one.
Amazing.
I love doing the same color on same color. I just think it just
it pops.
So when the pandemic hit, you know, I had all of my exhibits and events all lined up, and the pandemic hit, and it was just like everything came to a halt, like it did for many people. So one of the things that I did was I went and pursued my mixed media work that I was thinking of, and I started the research and development phase with that. Because it was a lot of elements go into it, like the fabric and the resin, and that changes things so much. So I started to experiment with it. I put no pressure on myself, again, like when I was learning my oils, no pressure. And I knew I was going to fail at the pieces of artwork, and I was going to just toss them out. And just knowing that helped my learning, because the pressure was zero, and you knew you're going to mess up. and there's going to be things that you're going to dispose of, but you're going to learn from it and ultimately come up with a product. And I did, and that was some of them. So in March, the gallery on Garrison, a lady called Melody Smith is the owner of that. She's fabulous. Her energy is so great. She approached me and she said, you know, would you like to do a show? And then in March, I didn't know whether we would be doing in-person events by June here, because things have moved so quickly with, you know, vaccines, and now we're able to kind of go to events without masks. I didn't know what to expect, and I thought, well, it's been over a year, it's local, she's a respectable gallery, so let's do this, let's see what happens. And it just so happens when my solo show did hit, the mask mandate has kind of eased off and people have been back, so it worked out so well. It was like the silver lining after the slump of being in quarantine.
Right.
So that worked out really well. She's got a beautiful space. It's on Garrison Avenue, on the main kind of area where the shops and the restaurants are. She's open Tuesday to Saturday. The work there is available for sale. It's on till July. So it's been fun to do that, and it's only an hour away from Fayetteville, where I am.
Yes.
So that's kind of worked out well.
I saw some of the pictures from, like, I guess like the opening of the exhibit, and everyone looked fabulous, and the space is so cool, and it's worth the trip for anyone to head over to Fort Smith and get a cool like meal and head and check out the gallery, all the fun stuff. I've been like kind of curious about the work behind you throughout our conversation, and I wanted to make sure I asked about it before, you know, we went any further.
Which one? The one on the easel?
Yes.
Okay. That's a painting that I think I was doing that before the COVID kind of started. And when COVID hit, I actually had an art reception in downtown Rogers in March. So everything came to a still with that painting. And yeah, everything stopped. So this kind of just sat there from the quiet, and it's so close to finishing. And I showed my sister and some friends this, who are Pakistani origin, and they were like, oh my God, you remember that? I remember when you wear the traditional dupatta, the scarf, and how it constantly slips off your hair because the silky fabric. And they were like, what made you think of that? And I said, I don't know, it's just the memory of wearing the scarf. So it's kind of coming to a finish. And I was able to use myself as a model for so much of it throughout COVID, which was fantastic, because that meant I could just isolate and produce. So yeah, I'll be getting back onto that one.
I'm so excited to keep track of that one on Instagram as it develops, to see like where it is now versus after. Is going to be so cool.
It's one of the paintings that's sat there for a while that I need to find time to get back into. It happens, so
there's a lot going on. So Shabana, I'd love to understand too, like, you know, there's so many different projects you're doing. They're awesome. What keeps you inspired and motivated to like learn and create and share?
I'd say it's people, it's talks like this, it's people believing in you, people seeing your work, doing exhibits, other artists reaching out to you and giving you advice, and then getting the results and achieving so many goals that you look at throughout the year. And that just makes me want to have more. It makes me want to give hope to perhaps somebody that doesn't see hope right now, because I've been there myself. So if I can give them a little bit of that, that would make me happy. That kind of motivates me as well. It's just tons of things, really. There's so much that I want to do with my art. And you know, growing up, going to art museums in the 80s and the 90s at school, I don't remember seeing artwork or artists of my skin color. So it's important I kind of represent that as well for everybody, really, to see there's people of different backgrounds being an artist, or there's portraits of different women of different skin colors and cultures. So that's important to me as well.
Yes. And as we start to wrap up, I love to ask people, is there anything that you've learned along the way that's, you know, made a big difference, or what would be, you know, some of your tokens of wisdom that you think the world should know?
I'd say hold on to your uniqueness. Think about what you can do rather than what you can't do. Focus on that and have a reason as to why you do what you do. I mean, I remember working in the corporate world in London, and you know, you get to a Monday morning and you're like, oh, not another week.
Like, not
most people have been there. It's like you just, here we go. And I used to leave. I used to wake up at 6 a.m. and physically leave the house at 7 to get into the office at 8. And then I'd get home at 7 p.m. most evenings. And you did it because that's what you thought. But now what I do, I mean, I do way more hours than what I did in London, but I enjoy it. This is my passion. And I've got that deep reason as to why I do it. And the hours just seem irrelevant because I'm just so into what I'm doing. So I'd say find your reason, your why. Hold on to your uniqueness and just think about, you've always got to learn and evolve. I think, for me anyway, that's what excites me.
I love it. I feel
I've done so many events where
inspired.
I've just thought I'm so out of my depth here. I really am. But yet I come out of it thinking, okay, what did I learn? And I put that in a notebook and I'll date it and I'll go back a year later and I'll think, did I really feel like that? And that's good because that means I've learned. And it's okay for me to feel like that. So yeah, just one of the small things I do.
I love that practice of like just a way of capturing how you felt in a moment. And it's a great way to measure that you have in fact like grown and learned so much along the way that we take for granted when we're part of the whole thing, right? And finally, Shabana, what do you want people to leave knowing about you? If there's like one thing that should stick in their mind, and then and also what are you looking forward to? That's kind of like a two-part.
What do I want to leave in their mind? Perhaps the energy that's gone into my work and the journey, for them to see that. And what was the next part of the question?
And I'm sorry, what are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? The rest of the year. I think since the pandemic hit, everything came to a halt and things have just picked up, and I've got another solo show coming in September. And that's out of state, so I'm excited about that. So while this one's going on in Portsmouth, I'll be planning for that and planning for loads of other events throughout the year. I have had exciting opportunities come up ever since then, and we're in the talks with those. So I'm just looking forward to everything rolling out this year and planning for next year even. There's only so much I can physically do this year, so sometimes I have to look ahead at the following year. So it's nice to be back. It's nice for art venues to be opening up, to be having in-person exhibits and events again. For me, it's a very people-orientated business, and I'm just glad it's all back again. So it's exciting. I'm just caught up in the moment of everything happening at the moment. So
yeah, I can't wait to see how your work continues to evolve and to stay tuned for these upcoming exhibits. And I can't wait for the moment our paths cross in person, because we're in a small enough area where like it will happen, even if it's not planned, or when I look forward to when we do plan it too. But I think it's such a pleasure to know you. I'm so glad that you are now one of my Northwest Arkansas friends and an artist to learn from and be inspired by. So Shabana, thank you so much for sharing your time and your story today. It means a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.